Distinguished participants, I would like to welcome you all on my behalf and behalf of my institution. My name is Elif. I'm from the Renewable Energy Director General, and I will be talking about the situation of the wind energy. And as well known, in the 4628 law, the main issue is that the regeneration of electricity has to be carried out by obtaining license, and this license is a kind of license and approval which is granted by our department, and accordingly the as regards the article in the third article of the related law with the change in this, and there's an exemption up to 500 megawatts in the renewable energy facilities. The co-generation energy and micro co-energy generation facilities, without taking any licenses or with exemption, they may they may have production. So this is the right that has been granted to them. Well, what has been put forward without having license? So first of all, for example, the consumers may meet their own requirements by producing their own electricity, and this having unlicensed production, this certainly meets the people's requirements, and it also provides an opportunity to have an extra revenue for them, and also this is a contribution to energy efficiency, and especially in the industrialists, the consumers which are also industrialists. You know, the electricity is a very high cost, so accordingly the industries have very low cost inputs. So it in the places where there is no opportunity for having big investments, there is a contribution of the small scaled enterprises. There is a contribution made to the economy. So these the unlicensed small scaled entrepreneurs certainly create a kind of volume. So in terms of industry and technology, on behalf of industry, there has been opportunity granted. So for that reason, now I will be talking about in unlicensed production related to wind, what kind of legislative regulations made in the secondary legislation, what has been done, and what is the roadmap, and how it has been planned and how it has been performed. So what I will be talking about is what is our situation. I would like to give to first floor to my colleague Mustafa Güzen from the same department where I am. Just shortly, please introduce yourself. Yes, Mr. Güzen, the floor is yours. Thank you very much, Ms. Chairperson. Before I start my presentation, I would like to greet you all with respect. My name is Mustafa Güzen. I'm working in the Energy Regulation Board and in Energy Regulation Market Board, and also I'm working in the field of betterment of energy issues, and also I'm working in the field of EU issues. In the time that has been allocated for me, I will be talking about unlicensed production, and in terms of the exempt production of electricity, I will try to reflect on some of the knowledge. In my presentation, what is the production activity in electricity market? I will be talking about this, and what kind of dimension it has got, and afterwards the exempted production and the network connection, the meters, and how is the operation. And apart from this, unregistered production, unlicensed production. In terms of actually production, the production can be divided into 5 parts, and one of them is the production of electricity under licensed production. So previously there was the auto group, and in terms of production license there are some activities, and within the license the related company establishes the power plant and it starts operating, and the production with the bilateral agreements are introduced into the market, and if it functions depend on the renewable resources. This can be evaluated, or this can be handled with the renewable energy issues. And the other one is the unlicensed production. So there's no obligation of establishing a company, and also the legal entity and as well as the real persons may continue on perform such productions. And there's also isolated production. So these are the companies, or these are the entities, just to meet their own requirements, produce such energy. So this is not related within the energy market regulatory board's activities, but of course people who are dealing with such issues have to be in line with the regulations. And there's also production related with R&D activities. For the time being, there's no institution functioning within this scope in order without having the electricity having a commercial value and up to 10 megawatt, these may be allowed. And why I explain all this, because these concepts are always confused with each other. So for that reason, in order to perceive the differences in between, I felt the necessity to explain this. Of course, what we will be dealing or focusing on this is the exempted production on this session.
Manufacturing of the electricity. The thing that we mean by license manufacturing, who can be engaged in electricity generation. These facilities have at maximum 500 kilowatt renewable energy power. These are listed in the law. When we compare these 3 parts, we can see renewable, cogeneration and micro-cogeneration manufacturing. They do not have any requirement for getting in a license or installing or establishing a company. In terms of ownership, entities and real persons can carry out renewable energy license production, but in the license production there is a condition that you have to be a real person or a legal entity. This feature of the renewable energy production is that real entities can carry out these facilities, but when it comes to cogeneration, there is no limitation in terms of installed power. Only the total effectiveness should be above 80%, and in micro-cogeneration there is a limitation of 50 kilowatts. So what is the surplus of energy? In the unlicensed energy manufacturing, the basic idea is that the real persons or legal entities should have certain subscriptions, and they do have a consumption facility. So what does surplus of the energy mean here? When it comes to renewable energy manufacturing activities, these real persons or legal entities can sell surplus of the energy. Actually, this selling in quotation is not the right term. I will explain it in detail. We can say it can be used with evaluation in addition to selling. The price is fixed here in the law code 5643. This price is fixed in the local integral parts. For the unlicensed products, there is a fixed price chart. And in the cogeneration, legal entities or real persons cannot sell the surplus of the energy. There is no place for selling the energy. The energy cannot be included in the system. If it's included in the system, there is no cost for this. If, let's say, there is energy of the surplus, and if it is given to the system, so what will happen then? The answer is that there is an unconditioned support or help for the system of the renewable energy mechanisms. In the scope of renewable energy mechanism portfolio, they have certain supports and they are reducing the burdens of the suppliers. When it comes to micro cogeneration, we can say that these legal entities can sell the surplus of the energy, but real persons cannot sell this surplus. Of course, these have been not created by the regulations done by EMRA. These are coming from the statements in the laws. If they sell the surplus of the energy, when in the chart 1 of the law coded 5346, the minimum payment is implemented. When it comes to connection basics, only this manufacturing facilities can be connected to distribution, and the consumption and production facilities can only be in the same distribution region. They cannot be in separated areas. This is very important. So you can ask this, why they should be in the same distribution area? Because there is a function of the system. They should be in the same distribution area, because when it comes to surplus of the energy, it is evaluated in the renewable energy mechanism. This is the approach that we need. As we have mentioned, sell, the expression of selling. We are selling to the government or the state. Actually, this is not the case, and this is not the right term. The TWEC, the government electricity institution, the intraday market or the balancing unit, there is a mechanism in the scope of this functions, and inside this mechanism there are certain productions, and these productions are evaluated previously in the intraday market sector. The intraday market is evaluated in the real time effects. So we can talk about an alignment here. Actually, selling to the government or the state is not the right expression. Selling is not the right expression. We can say that in the scope of balancing and adaptation or settling the concept, we can say that there is an adaptation. In the AG or YG, there is no limitation of connection, but in the AG we can see a limitation. With regards to this limitation, there are certain detailed technical limitations in the regulation. In order to establish a production or manufacturing facility, there should be consumption facility subscription. If you want to be engaged in unlicensed manufacturing facility, you have to be subscribed to a consumption facility. The person who will install this facility should have an consumption facility subscription. So what is this consumption facility? It can be a residential house or an industrial place or an office or plant factory. So there should be an active consumption facility. In each connection points, each person can have 500 kilowatt for renewable energy, and for micro cogeneration 50 kilowatt connection limitation is given. And with regards to connection, only one facility can have renewable energy connection up to 2 megawatt. It can be wind or solar energy. And above 2 megawatts, there should be certain correspondence or interviews with TWEC. When it comes to applications are not submitted to EMRA. In the licensed, you have to apply and send your applications to EMRA, but in unlicensed, you have to apply to province administration offices. And for the other resources, you have to apply to other companies. And in the implementation regulation, application schedule is regulated in a detailed manner, and applications are submitted monthly, on monthly basis. Each month, these applications are collected by the province institution, and they are evaluated in a collective manner. This is the function of the system. There are certain documentation in the application process. There are certain documentations of the usage or rentals, documentations. They have to be evaluated indifferently, and cogeneration facilities, effectiveness, information and documentations are really important. They have to be submitted. And with regards to renewable energy, wind and solar energy and usage should be given. Total consumption of the plant should be given. Why do we need the amount of the consumption? I need to explain this. If we talk about a connection point and there are certain applications for that same single connection point, depending on the consumption amount, the selection is done by the criteria. So what is the role of the distribution company? There are certain direct applications to the distribution companies, and certain applications are submitted to province administration office, and they should be evaluated in the first 20 days of the month. There is no delay. The finalization of the applications are planned in the regulation in a detailed and strict manner. If we talk about only one single application, there is no problem, because the distribution center get the application, evaluate and finalize it. It can be positive or negative, or it can give its own opinions. But when we talk about applications, more than one application, the company should apply this. There are certain criteria, and distribution center should take this criteria into consideration. First of all, it should look at the facility, whether it is durable to renewable energy resources or not. And then it should look at the cogeneration durability, and there are certain criteria with regards to the same place of the consumption in the production center, and consumption amount is also important here, but this criteria should be applied and implemented in a certain role with respect or in the respective order. If, let's say that there are different applications, they should look at the date of the application and the number of the applications, and then they should make the evaluations of these applications. Yes, this distribution company can evaluate these applications in these three manners: positive, negative, or alternative. In order to establish a manufacturing facility, the connection opinion should be positive, negative, or this application should be accepted by this legal entity. For the other applications done to the province offices of the government, the process goes like this. In terms of water regime, they should make an evaluation. There are certain local institutions of State Water Authority, and from the distribution center, they should get an opinion with regards to connectivity regime of this facility. In order to give a positive decree, water regime and connection opinion should be positive. If these both are positive, the province office will give the water usage documentation, and an investor should go to the Water State Authority and sign the agreement of water usage. And with regards to connection, they should go to distribution center and make an agreement. So they should be given at the same time. And with regards to connection approval, if there are certain alternative opinions, this alternative opinion should be accepted by the investor. Let's say that these applications, hydraulic facility gets this water usage right by the province office of the state, and the positive opinion is given by the distribution company. This information should be submitted to the related applier, and there is a date, there is a time period. It is 180 days, and within this period, distribution company should be applied, and all the documentation should be filled accordingly, and the process should goes like this. If let's say that your application process is positive and you have your agreement for water usage and connection points with the distribution center, for the hydraulic facilities connected from the renewable energy, you have the time period for 3 years, and for the other facilities you have 2 years, and your facilities from the AG you have 1 year. Within this time period you have to complete the establishment of your facilities. There are certain regulations of the meters, and the basic idea of the regulations of meters is that the energy need should be measured in a healthy manner, and if there is a draw from the system, in order to detect the energy amount of the system, there are certain regulations of the meters. Each manufacturing and production facility should have meters. When we talk about surplus of the energy, what is its position or situation right now? Actually, the basic driving point of the unlicensed production is to meet the personal or individual needs. When you give the energy to the system, this energy amount is measured, and all the criteria is given in the law, and the cost of this paid to the investors. Let's say that you have a production facility,
and let's say you have a generation plant corresponding to a consumption plant, and it can be more than 1, 2, provided that it does not exceed an installed power of 500 kilowatts. Could be 1 plant or could be 3 plants, 200, 200 and 100 in total. So all the related measurements are made, and the relevant charges and prices are paid. And let's assume that there's a daily balancing set-off is made, and measurements are made on an hourly basis, and how much you have generated on a daily basis, how much you have consumed, and whether it's plus or minus, because these are all set off and deducted on a daily basis. You can be on the plus side as an investor or on the minus side from day to day. They are calculated on a monthly basis in a cumulative way, and based on whether you are in the minus or in the plus, you are either billed if you have given surplus energy, you collect the charges, or you may have drawn energy because you also have a consumption plan, and then you would be obliged to pay for that. And why is it measured, and why are the deductions made on a daily basis? What we have in mind there is that in the renewable energy supporting law, the prices in the chart are given in US dollar cents, and because the exchange rates are provided on a daily basis, you can be in the plus or in the minus on a daily basis for the relevant plant. That is the idea the legislation had in mind, and that was how it was designed. And like I said, the surplus energy is measured by the distribution company, and if the consumption plant and the generation plant are at the same location, then it is taken into account as net energy surplus or requirement. But if they are geographically at different locations, these are measured separately, the generations and the consumptions, and then they are included into calculations in this manner. Like I have mentioned, in plants that are based on renewable energy, chart 1 prices are applicable, and if local components have been used, then chart 2 prices are applied. And in the case of microgeneration plants, for excess surplus energy given to the system, the lowest prices in chart 1 are applicable. And the surplus energy is received by the retail sales branch of the plant, distribution plant in the region. So the renewable energy, the surplus energy within the scope of renewable energy system, when it is made use of within the relevant laws, in the case of microgeneration, surplus energy is directly released to the retail outlets of the system and sold with the prices set forth in the tariffs. And no payment is made for the energy sent to the system from the cogeneration plants, and the prices in chart 1 are applicable for 10 years, and no bilateral agreement sales are allowed for the generation of unlicensed producers. Let's say you have built a plant, the surplus energy will automatically be made use of in the system, and the relevant charge is either paid to the owner of the plant. So within the scope of unlicensed production, the plant owners cannot go to the market and look for customers or make an effort to sell their surplus generation. Licensed companies do this, and they are allowed to do that, and they are required to do that. But for unlicensed producers, this is not the case. On the screen, we will see how the surplus, what kind of procedures are required for buying surplus energy. First, the distribution company for each plant the distribution company calculates it for real persons and legal entities, and then adds them on a source basis, groups them, source them, whether it's wind or solar based, etc. And then this information is sent to the balancing and settlement authority. And in the course of the operation of the system, all the money collected there is transferred by the settlement authority to the distribution company, and the distribution company directly sends it to the real persons or legal entities in net amounts, so they're not allowed to make any deductions. If there is any incomplete amount, let's say you are to receive 100, but you receive 90, then that has to be sent in a proportional manner. Maybe, let's say the distribution company, of course they are giving a service, and which has a the legislation also stipulates that there's a yearly operation charge per kilowatt hours, and at the time of application there is also an application fee that needs to be paid. For 2011-2012, that application fee was set as 250 liras, and by the end of this year, these prices will be readjusted for the year 2013, and the yearly operation charge is zero for the time being. That was the decision of EMRA, Energy Market and Regulation Authority. But this is going to be set on a yearly basis for each kilowatt hour. Why are they thinking of charging such an amount? Because the distribution company is operating the system, employing people, and runs the entire operation, and therefore they are required to receive something in return. And what kind of procedures are applicable when buying the surplus energy from the microgeneration plants? In this case, they do not buy it from the Balancing and Settlement Authority, but from the retail outlets, and the price is the lowest one in Chart 1. Because there are no specific charges in the law, and the board is entitled to determine the price in the case of microgeneration surplus energy. And now, production plants. Let's say you have completed, I have shown it, it's like 2 years or 3 years or 1 year. As soon as you build your system, you cannot commission it immediately. You are allowed to commission the plant on the first day of each month, because the surplus energy will be used within the renewable energy system on a monthly basis. Let's say you commissioned it on the 2nd of the relevant month. You need to keep it on hold until the end of the month, and you can be included in the system as of the 1st of the next month. That is, the calculations will be taken into account from the 1st of the following month. And no pro rata application is allowed. And based on the operation of the mechanism, we were obliged to do this in order to ensure parallel operations. Just like you are allowed to pay grid-based activities, also companies are obliged to pay the prices for the distributions companies. And if the production company and the consumption plant, if they are in the same location, But if they are separate geographically, then they are calculated, because otherwise it is the net amount that needs to be paid. And these charges are actually adjusted every year by the EMRA, Energy Market and Regulatory Board, and these specific tariff prices can be found in our website as well. Another subject is merging consumptions. Let's say you want to build an unlicensed plant. Your consumption may be low, or you may not intend to build a 500 kilowatt plant alone. So more than one real person or legal entities may merge their outputs, and they can build a plant, and they can authorize one party, and that party that is appointed as the authorized party, all consumption will be deemed as that party's consumption, and likewise production, vice versa. And in practice, we do have problems in terms of functioning and operability of this arrangement, and we are still working on what kind of a functionality may be offered for the system, and we are working on that. And if necessary, we can change the legislation or think of other steps to pave the path for this practice. Another topic is if for those, particularly those that are connected to the grid with low voltage, you can give a production source certificate in terms of emissions, and based on the generation, this is to correspond to the consumption of the previous year. And further, other than that, it can be at the low voltage level or until the plant is commissioned. And for those that are connected with high voltage, throughout the operation, they have to keep someone in charge of the plant. And there's no expropriation. And provided that you obtain permissions from the relevant authorities, you can build a production plant. And the other ones, unlicensed ones, cannot be included in the balancing procedures. And they can apply to EMRA for solutions. And unlicensed production plants, machinery and equipment. And we have certain rules for the life cycles of the machinery and production, because they have to be at most 5 years old at the time of generation. This is all I have to say. Thank you very much for listening to me. Mr. Mustafa Gözen gave us information about Mr. Mustafa Gözen gave us information about the operation of the legislation, and as a member of EMRA, I sometimes have difficulties understanding and interpreting our own legislation, because it has a technical dimension and it needs to go all the way down to the very minute details. And he has given you in a refined way so that you can understand. Therefore, in terms of timing, I gave some slack to my colleague so he can explain it in detail. But as much as writing the legislation, how it is implemented is also important, because regardless of how perfect you write it, if it cannot be implemented or if there are weaknesses in terms of implementation, it is inevitable that it is possible that there will be problems. And like as you have seen, the distribution companies have a very important role, because how the implementation is, how it is perceived, how it is interpreted. It was very important for me to have someone from the distribution company, but unfortunately, Mr. Ziyacan, who was to come from the Turkish electricity distribution company, he sent his apologies and he will not be attending today. And right now, we have an association on the Unlicensed Electricity Production Association, and Mr. Yalçın Kıroğlu, he's the president of the Unlicensed Electricity Production Association, and he's going to give us information on this topic. Thank you, Ms. Moderator, and dear members, dear guests. Mr. Mustafa Gezen from EMRA, he explained it very well, and I would like to add one thing. When you're drafting the regulations, if you're not drafting it with one party in mind, because many investors in the room, they are looking at the regulations from their own point of view, but you have to take into account the grid, the subscriber, the lawmaker, and the relations of all three parties are also regulated. So actually, some technical matters do not concern the subscribers.
Elektrik Üretim Derneği olarak
And as the Unlicensed Electricity Production Association, I'm going to explain you what we do. For 3 years now, we are operating in the unlicensed market to develop the market, particularly about wind energy. We had the opportunity to be in contact with many customers, and I would like to share our experiences with you. And now, why are we producing unlicensed electricity? This is one of the most important steps, like the third Bosphorus Bridge, the fast train. This unlicensed electricity production has the same significance for Turkey, because in the year 2001, trading in electricity was subjected to legal adjustments, and unlicensed electricity generation production is a reform for expanding electricity production to the public. So this goes down to all the way down to the individual person. Why shouldn't we produce 5,000 megawatts of electricity? And our minister said we can even do more, because there's a huge market potential, there's a good demand, so we can achieve this. And for establishments to be sustainable, and for our economy to have a higher competitive edge in the world, we have to be able to produce our own electricity, and also to reduce dependency to foreign countries, because almost 44 to 50% of the electricity we are using is from natural gas, and every year we pay an amount to the countries that we buy natural gas from. And one of the most important topics is the production of electricity on site to reduce the losses and illegal uses in the grid. The objective of our association is to support the companies for unlicensed electricity production and to ensure the development. So everyone who needs electricity, they should be able to produce their own electricity without applying for a license. And we support the entities that do this. This was just an idea in a convention. Then we shared it with the sector, and then we were officially built in the year 2012. And our website is, you can see it on the screen. And once you are a member of our association, you can be members on an entity basis or an individual basis. And this was our opening ceremony, September 26, 2012, in the EMRA Hall, and including the EMRA chairman. And we have received great support from EMRA and the public entities. And you see certain photographs from our opening ceremony. This was our cake. So that was how we started operations. And the press release was with our chairman and the EMRA president, and we received great support from the Parliament, Energy Council, Renewable Energy Directorate, the minister, and the sector players. And this encourages us a lot, and we find the power in us to do what we want to do. And in order to meet the demands of the market, we receive a great support from the public authority. And what are we? Our fields of operation are wind, solar energy, hydro energy, and biomass energy. And there are many amateurs and professional followers in internet and social media. We have task forces. And in order to be able to develop the market, we are working on they work on legislation, local production, introduction, promotion, membership, wind, solar, hydro, biomass. So they find the solutions or recommendations for solutions, and we share them with the relevant authorities. And right now, our most important topic is on the license side, on the legislation side, solving the issues, the problems that we face in the market in terms of unlicensed production. And we share it with the lawmakers together with the recommendations for solutions. And we have a regular feedback mechanism. There were problems in the Ministry of Forestry, State Water Authority, and we have shared it with the relevant public authority to solve the problems. And in the year 2013, we will be holding a convention on unlicensed electricity production to gather all the stakeholders under one roof. We regularly hold seminars. At least once we hold one training course or a seminar to raise the awareness in this area. And we work in collaboration with public entities to issue certificates and in order to train qualified individuals needed by the sector. In the year 2013, we will issue unlicensed electricity specialists, and we will give them certificates. And we want to support the local production, domestic production in Turkey. So, in summary, we have subscribers, product and service suppliers, the public entity, and our association is geared towards creating a synergy among all related parties and to develop the market. And as for wind, with our know-how of 3 years, let me share with you the following. We're talking about unlicensed electricity, but what exactly it is and at what stage are we? This is the latest situation. As of the end of October, We have received information from 21 companies. There were a total of 325 applications to distribution companies. 94 of them were rejected due to incomplete or wrong applications. 35 approvals are at the processing stage, but 196 were accepted. 77, green one is for the wind. So they were accepted. We have a problem with the hydroelectricity. It is at the bottom line. It is not our topic, so I'm not going into that. Which companies received the applications, particularly Uludağ Electricity Production and Distribution, which is in the Çanakkale area. Likewise, the Trakya, which is the farther west side of the Marmara region, that is being followed and monitored by Boğaziçi Distribution Company. And the total demand, the total power in demand is about 18.920 megawatts. And this is something, this is very good news for us. And when we look at the capacities, there are applications of 500 kilowatts, and they constitute approximately half of all the application, followed by what you see on the screen, down to 1 kilowatts applications of various capacities. But the legally permitted capacity has been applied for. And let's look at the market situation. The legal process is finally complete. I'm saying finally because for 3 years we have been working on it in close contact with the EMRA representatives, and the legal infrastructure is now in place. Actually, the first time it was published was December 2010. And since December 2010, it was revised and it was improved for the sector and for the subscribers. So it was published once again, issued once again in July 2011. And then the implementation procedures and principles were published in March 2012. And then we also drafted a contract between the subscriber and the electricity distribution companies for connection, the connection contract. Because that contract that needs to be approved and then published in the official gazette, and that was completed in June 2012. And people were asking for precedents and the previous examples, but this was not possible because we completed it in July 2011. And then what happened? A grid connection application process started. Like you have seen in the previous chart, the electricity distribution companies received applications for preliminary connections, and then there's a wrong perception in the market. These applications to the distribution companies are preliminary applications because that application being approved does not mean that that subscriber is legally eligible for that connection. It only means that the connection, existing connection, whether it's suitable for the transformer. So it doesn't mean that once you have the preliminary approval, you are done. After the preliminary applications are approved, what needs to be done is the design preparations. Because out of the 77 applications, they made their detailed designs, and then they submitted to TEDAŞ, the distribution company. Then it is approved by them. So there are no designs that were approved in wind, because this is not a simple process. When we talk about the design regulations, our implementation procedures and principles cover this aspect. Preparing a design takes long. It's a detailed process and not everyone can do it easily. let alone wind. Even when we look at the entire unlicensed electricity production sector, the number of designs approved by TEDAŞ, the distribution authority, is one. And that is the Konya Mera 200 kilowatt solar project approval. And so this process, we are working on accelerating this process on TEDAŞ side. So if we what happens next after the approvals? The 180-day design preparation period is long because of this reason, and after that there are the commissioning stages. The applications that are approved, the foreign orders are placed, and then what we mean by commissioning and
50 kilowattın altındaki ürünlerde
The products below 50 kilowatts, the processes are shorter. With the products 500 kilowatts and more than 500 kilowatts, these products are produced and they are transported to Turkey, and it takes approximately 5 or 6 months. Here I need to state this. Before this regulation was issued, there were certain examples who were not obeying in line with the regulation. They had tried to connect to the grid without approval of these projects or using the wind turbines. There were certain examples like this, and they were followed and monitored by EMRA and Turkish Electricity Distribution Center. In Turkey, you have to be included in the scope of unlicensed generation scope or licensed generation. Other than this, you are deemed as illegal producer, and you have to pay a fee for this. We do know 2 examples like this, and they are right now on the evaluation process. Unfortunately, they did not follow the unlicensed generation steps, and they have the connection to the grid without approval, so they are facing certain legal problems right now. Of course, there is certain good news for us other than this. For a very long time, the sector has a demand of limitation 500 kilowatts, and finally, lawmakers has approved that it will increase up to 1 megawatt. My dear friends, 500 kilowatt limitation is only valid in Turkey and the United Kingdom. There is no limitation like this in other countries. If we were in Germany or in other countries in European Union, other than the UK, if we wanted to establish our own wind turbine, the legal procedures would take a little time than this. But in Turkey, 500 kilowatts limitation put by the lawmakers finally will be increased up to 1 megawatt, and the draft of the law right now is in the Prime Ministry evaluation, and then it will be sent to Grand National Assembly Energy Commission. Then we will have a meeting with the Commission in order to evaluate and talk about the latest shape of the draft, and we will share our own opinions as association, and consecutively we will talk about our own opinions, and EMRA will make the new amendments of the regulation. Actually, it will republish the implementation period, and it will be enacted in actual manner. In order to implement 1 megawatt in actual manner, as far as I can say, it will take 6 or 12 months in the upcoming year. But no one can say that, yes, this is approved by the National Assembly, so I can get the connection of 1 megawatt. No one should expect something like this because it will take 6 or 12 months. But this change has opened new ways for the sector, and the investments are made easier with this, because in the world we have certain challenges in finding products, especially in the 500 kilowatt and 250 kilowatts, the producers are very limited. If you want to buy turbines of 2 megawatt or 3 megawatt, this is very limited. But when you talk about 500 kilowatt, this is very limited scope of the producers. Why? Because there is no limitation of this production in other countries. Other producers produce higher kilowatt values. Other thing, as our association wish, that in Turkey these technologies should be produced, because as Turkey we can manage many things and we have the know-how and information to be able to produce these technologies and products, but we do need certain time to manage to do so. Yesterday we talked this with Energy Commission. There are certain problems in the local content. Turkish Electricity Distribution Center, when they are evaluating certain projects, there is a prerequisite to be having the international certificates. For that reason, the project approval only is given to type certificate process, and right now there is no type certificate in the local content. For that reason, there is a problem in the certification. And when we compare kilowatt costs to the license market, we are a little bit disadvantages. When it comes to 2 kilowatt, 3 kilowatt, it is possible to find products, and it is 1,000 euro per kilowatt. However, in other kilowatt values, the price is higher. Let's give a very simple example. Let's say that we are transporting 500 kilowatt wind turbine from the port to the place, and when we add the infrastructure cost, when we evaluate all of this cost with 500 kilowatt investment, and the difference with the 1 kilowatt investment, we can see it is 20% of the investment, and this is a disadvantage for 500 kilowatt. Mr. Musa has summarized it in a brief manner, but I also would like to add something. In Europe, there are certain turbines which have been used in Europe for 5 years or 10 years, and or 15, 20 years, and there is an opinion to bring those turbines to country. However, in the legislation, there is a limitation of the year. This is 5 years of usage, so it means that we have to commission new turbines. When we talk about the problems of our sector, when we look in general, project approval process, as we mentioned before, it is very problematic. For 50 kilowatt wind turbine project design and 500 kilowatt project design, they are almost the same. The same procedures, the same process. When we talk about electricity process, I'm not exaggerating, believe me, you have to create huge folders of design, and this takes a lot of your time. Creating or designing a project of unlicensed turbine or licensed turbine, they are almost the same. There are little and slight differences here, and this is creating a disadvantageous point in terms of cost and time. So we have to get over this problem. What are the capacities of transformer distribution centers? In the regulation, for each transformer distribution center up to 2 megawatt, electricity distribution centers can give their approvals. But when it comes to more than 2 megawatt, they have to apply the approval of Turkish Electricity Distribution Center. But with the 3 megawatt and more than this, they should give the approval. Up to 4 megawatt, there is a limitation of 4 megawatts and 500 dimensions of the wind turbines. In Kayseri Electricity Distribution Center, for a transformer distribution center, we can see 4 applications, and this transformer center has completed its developments and it's completed its capacity. The cost and process after this creates problem. And likewise, Uludağ and Trajan Electricity Distribution Center, in certain transformer distribution center, we can see they have almost completed their 2 megawatt capacity. So this is a huge problem for the sector. Hadımköy region is a very industrialized zone, as we all know. But there is only one transformer center. In Büyükçekmece, there is one transformer center. In Silivri, there is also one transformer distribution center. When we go to Anatolia, in many big cities, we can see, even in the city centers, we can see only one transformer. Therefore, in order to improve the market, we have to solve the problems with regards to transform distribution centers. When it comes to local content or local production, I would like to emphasize it. In the local content, turbines production in Turkey, unfortunately, the supports should be improved, developed, and enhanced very much. R&D and production process take very long time. In the world, turbine production process with leading Denmark, and then we can see Germany. This technology has been developed by European countries, and then with cheap labor force and cheap steel and iron facilities, these facilities were taken to India. When it comes to number of producers, we can see less wind turbine producers than automobile or automotive producers. And know-how is also a problematic process in Turkey. It takes very long time. As I shared with you before, in the required reference material, there is no sufficiency in Turkey, and there is no certification in Turkey. As you all know, in Turkey, when you are buying a car, you prefer known brands. But some people are having hesitations in buying the brands that they do not know. For that reason, we have to be known and prove ourselves. Unlicensed production development in Turkey, there is a legal problem. Legal problems is having the first rank, but the most important second thing is the financial problem. Finance sector should be improved. But finally, there are certain new positive changes in the finance sector. Finance sector has recognized us as unlicensed electricity association. We hope that we will complete it in this month with the finance institution, with our protocols with them. We will be announcing our cooperation with these 2 leading finance sector. Until 2015, we will be objecting approximately 6 billion euro market size, and we will announce the surplus of energy, and the surplus of the energy can be sold within 10 years. Mr. Musa has said that this is not selling, but you are actually selling the energy, which is more than that you produce. In the scope of renewable energy support mechanism, the sector pays you and sells you again. So this is finance in the perception of decreasing the guarantees. So we have to come to this approach, and we have many positive developments with you, and in the near days we will share it with you. So thank you so much for your participation.
Ona teşekkür ediyoruz.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yalçın Kıroğlu. He talked about the unlicensed electricity production. There are 335 applications, 95 were rejected, 35 are being studied, and 77 were approved. And we see that wind is in the Aegean region, Marmara, and Boğaziçi, which covers the Istanbul and its hinterland. So there's a total of 19,000 megawatts, 19 megawatts. When I started my speech, I said that I am leading the EMRA group, the head of the electricity market. We are receiving large-scale and small-scale applications, but even though 19 megawatt is a small-scale figure, we place great importance in unlicensed production. But I'm a legal person. My field of activity is the law. So we place great importance in words and wording. But I see that there is this mistake. We call it preliminary license or unlicensed. This 500 kilowatt limit going up to 1 megawatt, 2 megawatts. In my opinion, it can go all the way up to 5 or 10. But rather than that, at the end of the day, you know, wind is something that has a negative effect on the grid. Solar energy, likewise, it has similar implications. But rather than the values there, how it will affect the system, and the relevant plans need to be made properly. So if it's 1 megawatt or 1.5, we can give the permission for access. So rather than implementation, planning is of more importance, and I would like to underline the sensitivity there. Hydroelectricity, likewise, this is the reason, because the incentives need to be prepared well. They need to be made in a clever way, and we, as the authority, when we are preparing the wording, we don't instead of other than thinking if it's licensed or not licensed, but also we have to calculate well where those incentives will take us to. And now I would like to invite Mr. Mr. Uğur Yüksel, the General Coordinator of the Electricity Distribution Services Association. Mr. Yüksel. Good morning, Ms. Moderator, dear panelists, dear guests. I would like to thank you all for coming here. About production, unlicensed production, I would like to talk to you about ELDER, our association's opinions, and the general sector opinions. ELDER means, it stands for Electricity Distribution Services Association. Our association was built in 1999. It is one of the oldest NGOs in the sector, and all the companies of the 13 distribution regions that were privatized, and also TEDAŞ, the distribution company, is also a member of our association. And there are 13 distribution regions, and the number of total subscribers, we cover 55% of the total production. And just like Ms. Moderator, Ms. Elif said, as for the distribution, TEDAŞ representation, because TEDAŞ is our member, I believe we are representing them here as well. But as for the technical matters like connection agreements, I will try to answer those questions as much as possible, because those were Ms. Elif's concerns. Unlicensed production. and renewable energy resources. All these topics actually, this is a result of a paradigm shift of 20 years. The decline of the carbon-based energy resources and the environmental impacts, environmental concerns that are on the rise, variety of resources, the government's priorities, and the energy sector, particularly the electricity market, and its tendency for liberalization are actually the forefathers and the dynamics of what we were discussing.
Bir
There's a privatization process, and currently we are discussing about separating the activities of supply and distribution, and the renewable energy-based production is being more and more supported through public finances and through adjustments made. Subsidies are offered in the financial sense, investments are facilitated, and the scattered distribution and demand management, these are all in the agenda of the sector players. So within this scope, the European Union and the governments, they are discussing and examining various strategies and roadmaps, and there is the 2008 Climate Energy Pack, which targets the year 2020, which includes the meeting 20% of the demand through renewable energy resources, and decreasing consumption to by 20% from the 1990 figures, and supporting the research and development activities, and reducing the greenhouse gas emissions 20% below the 1990 figures. So these are the objectives, and in the political sense, these decisions make significant contributions. And when we look at Turkey, we have a 2023 target, meeting 30% of the demand through renewable energy resources. In order to reduce our dependency on foreign countries, and in order to solve to a certain extent the foreign deficit problems, we intend to use all our thermal resources and geothermal resources, and we intend to reach 20 gigawatts of installed power in wind energy by the year 2020, and we intend to reduce again by 2020 the natural gas utilization by 30%. And renewable energy system and the licensed and unlicensed energy productions will have significant investments and significant increases of production in the coming years. Let us look at the current figures. We are still very much behind. This is nothing new. And let us look at the European numbers. Germany installed power is 29 megawatts. Spain and France follow Germany, and the total 27 European Union's members are seen. It's about 100,000 megawatts of installed power, and Turkey's share is 1,800 in this figure. When we talk about unlicensed production, financing is an issue. And in order to be able to activate the financial resources, whether it's sales or not, whatever we call it, tariff is very important. And there is this feeding tariff. China, Australia, US, Japan. And let us look at the European figures. I try to reflect them. When we look at the 2011 tariffs in the small bottom chart, they have real complex and complicated tariff structures in Italy, UK, Germany. So it is not right to give a single figure, but just for the sake of comparison, we have used it. These are the tariff figures for plants below 100 kilowatts. We see the charts. Italy is leading, and with the new adjustments made in Turkey, which is satisfactory for us, that price is 7.3 dollar cents per kilowatt hour. We are not a panel discussing wind energy solely, but when we look at the distribution companies and the investments to be made in solar energy and their effects on the system, we see that this will be much more important, and therefore I wanted to share some solar figures. Germany is currently leading, and the total installed power has reached 25,000 megawatts. Italy went from the fourth to the second rank, and in the year 2010 it was 12.8 gigawatts. And Japan and the US are leading countries likewise. And I have to underline, in the year 2011, the solar energy increased by 86% just last year. Let's look at the tariffs, the supported tariffs. For 10 years, we had a price of we will have a price of 13.3 dollar cents, but France is the deal term is 20 years and 62.6 dollar cents. The prices are not, the tariffs are not comparable, so countries try to support it, and the agreement terms are 20 years, and the prices paid for kilowatt hours are quite high. This is the Italy example, because like I said, it ranks second now as of the end of 2011, and there's an installed power of solar energy of close to 13 gigawatts. And how did the process evolve? The feed-in tariff was actually prepared in the year 2007, and in the year 2008 it was 432 installed power, and in the year 2011 it reached 13,000 gigawatts. But the breakdown and the distribution of the figures, it's much more important, because the total 13,000 megawatt installed power is constituted by 110 systems. 110, there are 110 small plants, because they are built in the roofs of houses, and there are 180,000, the second row of the bottom chart, and the other figures are, as you see, constituting the total capacity. In unlicensed production and renewable energy production, if we try to compare Turkey with Italy, when there are connections from 250,000 connection points for wind and solar, how are you going to manage the system? Because this is one of the problems that we will be facing in the next 3 to 4 years. And the cooperation with the sector shareholders, the scenarios need to be prepared. The regulatory authorities' coordination is necessary for managing this process. So these are our top priorities. When we planning the distribution system, there's also a paradigm shift again. When the classic typology from the source to the consumer is no longer the case. Independent from the installed powers of the system, and this makes an optimum and balanced distribution system more difficult to design, implement, and maintain, because in that case we are faced with very complicated engineering problems and technical quality, reliability, and availability factors which need to be taken into account for the distribution system. Actually, this multivariable optimization model can only be idealized and managed in real time if grids are at optimum levels, because smart grid is a requirement. Actually, it's not a preference, because the grid, the distribution system, has to be able to cover the new stakeholders and manage it on a real-time basis, particularly for the scattered plants. In scattered systems, it was mentioned a while ago, the losses being reduced is a result that is expected, because the distribution activities at micro level or mini levels, this is one of the most important outputs. Carbon to reduce, other than reducing the carbon-based energy dependency, it also reduces the losses in the system. And although this is not a natural consequence in the typology, there's a reduction is expected in the technical losses. And in terms of technical losses, mathematical models can demonstrate a reduction by 30% in the, or 40% in the losses. And all the world entities are allocating resources and trying to determine policies and strategies. For instance, China, until the year 2015, China allocated $20 billion, and the total amount to be spent is 200 billion euros in order to materialize their 2020 targets. And in US, there are resources allocated for macro scale projects, and the European Union has allocated over 10 billion euros for smart. They have smart grid structures, technology, and design, implementation, and development projects are in place. In order for the European Union to reach 2020 targets, they need to invest 200 billion euros. This is prepared by the European Union, and this is a study made by the European Union. And you see the names in the third bullet, all the common projects actively with the active participation of the European Union members. The most known one is the Smart Grid Task
hem yol haritalarını
roadmaps, and the implementation designs are attempted to be carried out. And as ELDER, as our association, Smart Grid is also one of the most important priorities for us for the next 3 years. And last June, we created a structure called the Smart Grid Platform, coordinated by ELDER and led by the distribution companies, with the open to the participation of all stakeholders, coordinated by EMRA and TEDAŞ and Ministry of Energy, that is the public entities, are also involved and engaged in this platform. And this platform operates in many areas. I have to underline the fact that Ministry of Energy is working on a strategic plan and roadmap for the smart grid. And the smart grid platform that we have created is, rather than the policy documents or strategies, we are focused on the implementation of technology and the management of the grid. but the roadmap and the strategy studies of the Ministry of Energy shall be complemented by us. Of course, we intend to do that, but our top priority is to solve the problems and to find solutions that can be implemented immediately, and to find the examples from worldwide and to implement and test them on a micro scale. And there are certain NGOs worldwide or similar federations, and we also are members of those, and the most important two ones two are listed below. Global Smart Grid Federation, covering 16 countries, the US, the entire EU, and Japan, 16 different countries. That federation encompasses them. And as ELDER, our association, there will be a smart grid convention to be held on December 3, and that is when our membership will be official. And in the year 2013, within the scope of the pilot studies, we will be conducting many events. One of them, the first one is the 12th and 13th February U.S. Technical personnel workshop, and this will be focused on technology aspects. And in April, with the Chamber of Electricity Engineers, we will be supporting an event. And in May and September, we will be focusing on designs, we will be focusing on implementation, and we are planning various activities. And we also have a TWEC event. One is joint RD projects with a focus on smart grid. TÜBİTAK is the scientific entity in Turkey, the official. And EMRA distribution companies are allocated a resource for R&D projects, and with the support of TÜBİTAK, the scientific authority, and EMRA, we intend to regulate them. And like I mentioned, our focus and priority is smart grids, and as an extension of smart grids, energy efficiency is a priority. There are certain projects that TÜBİTAK cannot make them commercial, and we are intending to bring them to life within the scope of this cooperation. And the objective here is that RD, research and development, should not be collecting dust on the shelves, but they should come to life and they should be implemented. And like I have mentioned a while ago, we have shared the figures for 21 companies, and this is a breakdown. We see similar figures, applications, positive. The acceptance has reached 75%. And the completed applications, 75% are accepted. Of course, there are certain technical or administrative discrepancies and shortcomings, but both parties, both the investor and the grid manager and the distribution company, as they gain know-how, as they gain experience, these periods will shorten and the discrepancies will be reduced. Thank you for listening to me.
Sayın Yüksel'e teşekkür ederim.
Thank you so much, Mr. Yüksel, for his presentation. Mr. Yüksel has mentioned about the distribution planning as ELDER. What are the facilities, activities, and what is its approach and its association approach for unlicensed production? And the most important one is that I think it is going to be most popular production investments in our country, because I see this in our investors. This is just like a habit. The trend, this fashion can be seen in our investments as well. And once upon a time, maybe you can remember, tourism was very popular. Many investors wanted to invest in tourism, and then textile became popular, so they shifted into textile, and in some period everyone wanted to open a hospital, private hospital, and this is my observation. Currently everyone would like to open an electricity plant. This is an approach, this is the trend. In the last days, I was in an accessory shop and two ladies were talking, and her husband bought a hydroelectricity plant, and she is the owner of shops. That's why they are not seeing each other very much. I need to make this warning. You have to have an infrastructure in order to operate and invest this sector. That's why it is not similar to textile or the tourism. But I want to emphasize that hydroelectricity was very popular, then wind became popular, then unlicensed production became popular. Now solar is very popular, as you all know. Capacity has been announced. According to me, biomass is really important. It is going to be very popular, I think. Biomass, if you ask me, biomass is going to be very popular because this is really supported. Plus, beside support in biomass, in terms of environmental concerns, it has certain advantages in the eradication or elimination, and energy will be polishing this fact. Thank you so much. Now I would like to invite Electricity Distribution Services Association President, Mr. Lawyer Süleyman Boşça. Esteemed participants, on behalf of myself and on behalf of my association, Electricity Distribution Services, I would like to welcome and salute you with all my respect. My presentation will be different from technical issues. It will be about facility completion after the connection agreement. As you all know, there are certain agreements. EPC agreements will be my presentation subject. EPC agreements are having big importance, like financement or technical infrastructure of a facility. Investors, when they establish electricity facility, of course, they can make a variety of agreements. However, there is a distinguishing point of EPC, and it is given engineering, procurement, and construction in a holistic way, and it minimizes the risk effects. And beside this, if investor wants to he can get engineering services in a different agreement, like procurement and construction services. However, there are different disadvantages of these agreements if they are scattered. In the electricity facility establishment, EPC agreement is important. When investors make investments, they should take EPC into consideration. That's why we thought this presentation will be very important for you. When we look at the advantages of EPC agreements in terms of investors, we can see that all the responsibility is handled by one single consignor, and we can see a fixed agreement cost here. And the due date of the facility establishment, they are detected with a fixed date. We can detect it and determine it with EPC agreements. And beside it, there is only one person who is related with the investors. We can say that investor can save money and time with that. And also there are certain advantages in terms of minimizing the risk coming from legal and financial concerns. What are disadvantages of EPC? Actually, there is one disadvantage of EPC agreements in terms of investors. It can cost very highly. The reason for that, contractors of EPC agreements are not very common, are not very widespread. One contractor possibility is not very common, and all services can be supplied by a holistic way. For that reason, EPC agreements are in higher amount when compared to the other agreements. There are certain criteria in EPC agreements, certain articles. These are the most important articles in EPC agreements, and I would like to give certain information with regards to that. Scope of the agreement and delays and expansion of time, force majeure situation and share of the risk, performance guarantees, and some guarantees. When we look at the scope of the agreement, in the EPC agreements, the scope should be clearly stated. This is a very important fact for the contractors and lenders. The technical details should be given. Actually, this is not very easy because some things may be skipped and may not be may be disregarded, and it can create certain conflicts for the owner of the project. For that reason, this agreement should be based on the lump sum basis, and this is very important. And it should be created and stated in a clear manner. Besides this, with regards to scope change in the agreement, there should be certain decrees and provisions in the regulation, because when the agreement is on the process, when it comes to regulation changes, technological changes and design changes, in this certain changes point, there can be some requirements to change the regulation or the scope. If there is no provision like this in that point between the owner of the project and the lender, there could be certain conflicts which can affect the trend of the process. So in that sense, there should be certain regulations which can give positive advantage to the owner of the job. But in the changes of the scope, how we will get these changes of the scope and the duration, the time, the situation of the approvals or rejections, all these details should be clearly stated. When we look at the license regulation, the dues and dates are stated in terms of the completion of the facility, and it takes 1 to 3 years. Therefore, this duration are absolute durations. They are fixed in absolute durations, so there is no delay or expansion of this time. When you use this time period should be taken into consideration strictly, and if there are certain probable delays, they should be dealt with these statements in order to prevent the right losses of the investors. If the facility is accepted to operation late, there could be certain financial problems, because when the creditors give credits, they take the operation time into consideration. So if there are certain delays in the operation of facility, the indemnities should be given in the agreement, and also fines should be given as well. I can summarize it. If there is no fine procedure in the agreement, the owner of the project, and there are certain problems of the contractors. If the owner can prove these shortcomings, he can be indemnified. If the time is over, you can also demand the fine conditions. In order to expand the time, the conditions should be met here. With regards to time expansion and workflow, 25th article of the agreement should be taken into consideration. And force major conditions, how we will share the risk. This is a very important and crucial subject, because when we look at these agreements, force major conditions are stated in the agreements as main provisions. Normally they are stated like a copy-paste manner. Actually, the risk share is very important. If there is a risky situation, the most important thing is to survive the agreement, and the risk-sharing provisions should be defined here. And also, if there are certain major conditions, in order to eliminate the risky situations, the policies should be stated here. If there is always a policy here, and if there is a harm, contractor should pay the harm equivalent to the owner via, instead of waiting for the policy center to pay the damage, he need to pay itself in order to diminish the time wastes. And there are certain performance guarantees in the regulation. There are certain tests in the 25th and 15th article. We can see the quality standards should be met. Therefore, in the transition acceptance, this test should be given, and performance guarantees should be eligible here. In performance guarantees, the first thing is that in terms of contractor, there is a performance guaranteed for it. We need to talk about the performance guaranteed for the contractor, and there is a minimum performance detection here. We need to detect the minimum performance level. These are very crucial. If the facility that you're establishing is not supplying the criteria of the performance, the optional rights should be stated in the agreement. Let's say that if it can provide the minimum performance, the guaranteed performance and the minimum performance is having a gap and there is a harm, and it should be written in the agreement. However, if it's not given, in this situation, the employer should have certain optional rights, like giving up from the agreement or demanding the other rights. These optional rights should be stated in the agreement.
ilgili bir takım
As for the guarantees, there's a common nature for all contracts. There may be advance guarantees, performance bonds, and guarantee conditions may be required, and lenders also have certain requirements. And what is the applicable law? According to us law people, this is one of the titles, the headings of a contract, because normally we write it at the very end, and this is one of the last provisions applicable. And in our law, there is a contract freedom principle, but this freedom is not an unlimited freedom, because the contract may not be against the governing provisions of the law, and therefore the applicable law has a direct effect on the soundness of the contract. For instance, if you have executed a contract that is as per the Turkish law, and in case you write an article that is against the Turkish law, then those provisions will become ineffective. And So you have to determine the country of law first. And furthermore, what matters in case of a dispute that is due to contract, of course they are based on good faith, but in order for the disputes to be solved in a short period of time, certain mechanisms are in place. One of them is intermediation, and this is in our lawyers' law. This mechanism has been included, and it doesn't have much practice, but if it is applied and if it does become in practice, the workload of the courts will be reduced, and also arbitration, the issue of arbitration, it is processed much faster compared to the state legal system, and particularly in contracts of energy production. Instead of technical experts to be appointed by the courts, the arbitrators can appoint their own relevant parties, and this has to be included in contracts. And if these are not included in the contracts, also courts can try cases of disputes, and the relevant provisions also need to be included in the contract. I would like to thank you for listening to me. Thank you very much.
Sayın Avukat,
Mr. Süleyman Boşça gave us important information about energy procurement contracts. Now I do this, and we all do it. I wish we could express the EPC contracts in Turkish. We always say minimum performance bond. We don't say the Arabic. There are three versions for minimum. One is Arabic, one is Turkish, and one is of Latin origin. So I hope we can use the one that has a Turkish origin. Now we have exceeded the time that is allocated for us. I would like to take question and answers.
arkadaşlarımızın kendini tanıtmasını
Please first state your name, and also do not give any pirate papers or decrees. Just ask your question, and also tell us who you're asking. I'm from TEDAŞ General Directorate, so I would like to say TEDAŞ is represented here. I attended at the last minute, and I learned that Mr. Ziya won't be coming. We are also in charge of the license project. As for the solar issue, the second project was designed, and the third is approval stage, and the designs are being received. I am in charge of those designs, but for instance, Izmir, I am trying to run that region as much as possible, but we cannot receive the designs even because the chief of general staff, they are, and also the undersecretary of Turkish intelligence, they need certain documents, and because of those papers required by the general staff and the undersecretary of intelligence, we cannot even receive the applications. So we are working on licensing, and on November 6th I wrote a letter to the Ministry of Energy about the unlicensed designs. I both asked about the interaction report. Is there a limit? Is there a cap? And what do we do for the RD projects for 5 or 10 kilowatts? I have asked that. And also, like Mr. Yalchin said, the documents for the licensed, whether they would be necessary for the unlicensed projects as well. So we are waiting for information from the ministry as well, and we are trying to do our best. Thank you. I knew that you were here, so I was relieved. But thank you for your contribution. Yes, there's someone in the back.
Merhaba.
Hello. My question is, I am contemplating of doing this as an entrepreneur, and if I am just a residence owner, and if I go into a wind turbine business, could I just build a turbine of 500 kilowatts? And if I did so, would I be rejected? I guess Mr. Mustafa Gözen is in charge of it. He's from EMRA, and once we reach an agreement about the wind turbine, how long does the process take? We have applied to the distribution company, and then after the application date, how long does it take on average and on an estimate basis until the commissioning stage or operation stage? And that is all I have to ask. Thank you very much. Now, as for your first question, I can say that this is the relation between production and consumption. Basically, in unlicensed electricity production, the basic objective is to have the real entity or the legal entity to meet his own requirements. But if his production, to what extent is he required to consume it? There is no limit to that for the time being. But the minimum condition that we are looking in the legislation is actively and actually as a subscription. He has to have a subscription, a consumption facility that consumes electricity. Whoever is intending to conduct unlicensed activities, either as a real person or a legal entity to produce unlicensed electricity. Let me give an example. This can be a house or a commercial plant. It could be a supermarket. It could be a business, an office. And the electricity energy power that you produce, there is no limitation as to you have to consume X%. So let's say you produce 100 units, you can consume 1 unit or 50 units. But consumption, your consumption will also continue along with your production, and the additional energy or the surplus energy that you give to the system or the extra energy you withdraw from the system, you either pay for it or you either collect the charges, and what those amounts will be have been included in the market design, and I hope this has answered your question. As for your second question, in the case of unlicensed electricity production, nothing, from the application date to the end, everything has a timeline. The applications will be received on a monthly basis, and they will be the opinion about the connection access will be given until by the 20th of the following month. And after the decree is made, the decree said there's a minimum period of 180 days. And whoever is to build the production facility, be it a real person or a legal entity, the documents and the information need to be compiled and presented in 180 days, upon which within 1 month a system establishment agreement is to be made. So you have to add these, like 180 days, 30 days, 60 days from there. So we're talking about a maximum period of 270 days. And think of the 3-year period for the construction. That will give you an idea from the application date to the completion of the stage of the system.
İyi günler, Ahmet Duran.
My name is Ahmet Duran Şahin from Istanbul Technical University. We talked about wind energy feasibility process, particularly for 500 kilowatts and above. This is a serious timeline, and there are certain characteristics of wind. It changes all the time, and it is subject to external factors. And in that case, the turbines are seriously affected and the efficiencies are decreased. And when we go to licensed production, this process has certain stages, and then it is accepted if it's done properly. But when we come to licensed production, it is as if there is no serious feasibility process that is necessary, and it can be solved with the documents in hand. I feel like there is this impression. So if only with maps or only with hearsay, how developing the feasibility project for particularly unlicensed projects, this is either going to be for factories or plants or in residential areas. Will the wind turbines be affected more? And I believe that their efficiency will be much less. So please do not think like your project is a small project and you can just skip the feasibility process. I think this is a wrong impression. Okay, thank you. Yes. Now, dear professor, thank you very much. In order to keep my time short, I didn't go into technical details, but as the association, all investor candidates need to make an estimate return rate analysis, and then they have to contact specialist companies, universities, and prepare a preliminary feasibility study. And this is what we recommend. We recommend that they do not even start thinking about it without this feasibility study, because investments of 250 kilowatts, these are serious projects, and there are serious wind values. And all investor candidates, they have to rely on the know-how and on they have to make a preliminary study for all these. Thank you very much. Hi. My name is Tolga. I am working in a different sector, a different branch of EMRA, and what they gave is correct. There is no numerical restriction, but it is essential that they produce to meet their requirements. Now, from a legal point of view, when this is sent to court, what would the point of view of the judge be, or of the court be? It could be that they need very little, but then they sell a lot. What if we meet this kind of a case in the future? Because they say that it is essential. The law says the law uses the word essential. So it is essential that they produce to meet their consumption. Who is going to file the case and on what grounds? If it's a public case, for instance, public case, so there is no microphone. Or one neighbor can sue another neighbor. You have to have a right or an interest, and how will your production be impacted to allow you to file that case? Because there need the justifications. It has to have justifications. It has to have certain grounds, and without seeing the parties and the grounds and the justifications, I couldn't make a comment on that. It wouldn't be healthy, because okay, the law says the producer it is essential for the producer to meet his requirements, his needs. But this is a framework law, and the second secondary adjustments can be made by EMRA, because EMRA is authorized, and EMRA is can exercise its discretion and state that there is a requirement, and this is not bound to or subject to any consumption or production percentages. And also in these secondary auxiliary adjustments or amendments, EMRA says that, for instance, large-scale investments cannot be made, and small-scale investments will contribute to the country productivity, and there is a contribution to efficiency as to energy being generated, where it is consumed, and the essence of the energy law. So they are not written to protect the production companies. The law 4628 is a consumer focused law to provide cheap energy compatible with the environmentally friendly and in a consistent manner. So all the amendments that we introduced, they are not to reduce the portfolio of the energy production companies, but our basic indicator is how the consumer will be affected. And in my opinion, exercising the right of discretion can be defended, but we need to see the appeal letter for filing the case. And my colleague add something, and I would like to listen if he has any additions. I fully agree with what Ms. Elif says, and we need to take another topic into account. Okay, it is essential that they produce as per their consumption, but Mr. Yalchin said, for instance, he talked about the limits of the capacities in transformer centers. So the electricity that is produced there, it shouldn't be produced for commercial purposes, but if there are other subscribers who wish to connect to that transformer center, they need to be taken into account as well. So it is the duty of the distribution companies. Let's say if someone who pays an electricity bill of 100 liras and looking at his past consumption, his average need can be determined, and that assessment for the production should be made by the distribution company. And there is another reason. The other parties that wish to make unlicensed electricity production, because of the lack of capacity, they shouldn't suffer, they shouldn't bear the consequences of the capacity shortcomings. So it is the duty of the distribution companies, and maybe, let me put it this way, let's say someone who uses one light bulb, if he has applied for 250 kilowatts, and if he doesn't consume much, maybe the distribution company should introduce a restriction. And there is no such thing. I'm just making an interpretation, because the objective of EMRA is to ensure the security of offer, because the more investments we have, the better it is for our country. But we have to think of the other distribution companies as well, and that is the law article that is used. Mr. Kıroğlu wants to make a comment. Yes, thank you. For 3 years, as someone who has worked in this market for 3 years, okay, we have the regulations, we have the laws, and when we look at it from the lawmaker point of view, we see that it is compatible with the law and it meets the requirements of the sector. And we have heard this from the minister, from EMRA specialists, and these made it all the way to the headlines. Someone who consumes one light bulb of electricity per day can build a plant of 500 megawatts, but I don't think we will see that. And the lawmaker the Energy Commission, I would like to thank them. In line with the requirements of the market, the current legislations and the current requirements, the ministry is working with we are working in good coordination and cooperation with the ministry. And if you look at the new amendments, what matters most is that the additions made were in favor of the subscriber, were in favor of the consumer, and to pave the path for the market, to open the doors for the market to proceed. So I do not think that we will come across such a problem. Thank you very much.
Ferit Kalfoğlu ismim.
My name is Ferit Kalfoğlu. With regards to the subject, I would like to say something to Mr. Aycan. Right now, when you think this subject in financial concerns, the consumer itself, if he is not meeting its for its own need, it is not reasonable in terms of financial concerns, because the material coming from the law or legal concerns, if we take type certificates or other certificates into consideration, if the investor does something like this, the return on investment will take up to 12 years. So this is not very probable in the near future, I think. My name is Ayhan Gök. I would like to ask a question that, as you all know, 500 kilowatt 1000 megawatt regulation, as you all know, is ready, and Prime Minister has announced that it is ready and it will be implemented, but the Commissioner said that it would be 2.5 megawatts. So what do you think about this? As an investor, we are very confused. What should we do? Should we wait for 2.5 kilowatt or 1 kilowatt, or should we go on with the current 500 kilowatt? Thank you so much. This is a very reasonable question. When we are trying to explain 1000 megawatt, the situation will take 6 months to 12 months. I try to say this for your concerns. If I were in your shoes, I would do this. With regards to smart grid, as Mr. Ur has mentioned, unfortunately in Turkey we do not have the infrastructure of a smart grid. There are many limitations and shortcomings. However, the regulations are given this right to us. We cannot connect the generation center to the grid. You can connect 500 kilowatts as of today, as you all know. You need to make your preparation and you need to choose an expert company in order to make your generation. You have to make your grid connection and facility choice approval, so it can take up to 3 months. Then, as you all know, there is a duration of 180 days, but if I believe that it will take minimum 6 months. At the end of 6 months, you can get 500 kilowatt or 1000 megawatt. So, but today, I absolutely wanted to start. Today, my suggestion is 500 kilowatt startup. Then you can add 100 kilowatts more, so you can reach up to 1000 megawatt. As Energy Commissioner has mentioned, the 2.5 kilowatt, it is his own personal opinion, and we support his personal opinion, because in Turkey, in certain period or in certain time duration, in the obligation of license procurement, it should be eliminated in other countries. Actually, the trend is going towards that way. The new regulation, when it was designed for 200 kilowatts, and it became 500, and the 500 will become 1000, maybe 1000 will become 2.5. So in the future we will come in a position, and that position we will not have any obligation for a license. As an investor, I will do this. As a consumer, you are paying for a generator, and there is no return of this money that you are paying. So you have to evaluate all these conditions. because of the infrastructure connection of the grids, 500 kilowatt is a very important power of electricity, so we suggest it should be done as soon as possible. The thing that you mentioned, wind and solar, as you have stated, 500 kilowatt applications could be done, but later on, maybe when you can increase your capacity, it can create certain problems in hydroelectricity. But from the water association of the state, I corresponded with some of my friends. If you apply for 500 kilowatts, which is not suitable for 1000 megawatts, for instance, it will not be confirmed. This is just the opinion. This is actually the problem will automatically eliminated for hydroelectricity plants. You cannot apply for 500 kilowatts facility establishment for 1000 megawatt place. Is there any other question? Because we're exceeding our time very much. My name is Orhan Çaran. Electrocarbon, I'm the CEO of that electrocarbon company. I have two questions for Mr. Mustafa. My first question is, there are foreign investors, as you all know, and they're very interested in unlicensed production because their working conditions or functions are very similar to what we have in unlicensed production. Normally, they take 25 years as basis when they make an investment, because 25 years is the reasonable time for wind or solar energy investments. But in our regulation, we can see the price as fixed for 10 years. At the end of this 10 years, the price, what is going to be done about this price? The investor, according to which tariff he will make an evaluation if he has a surplus of production. My second question is that when we talk about certain conditions that different investors are to found a facility together in partnership, so you said there are certain problems in practice. Can you please briefly detail this? How will you evaluate it? Let's say 5 investors gather. How will these procedures be evaluated? How will invoice be sent, or which person is going to be responsible for electricity invoice or other technical stuff? So what do you think about this? Thank you so much for your first question with regards to the law. New regulation, renewable energy sources which are not in the scope of unlicensed facilities are subjected to be supported by renewable energy mechanisms for 10 years. But after this 10-year period, we cannot say that this is certain. At the end of this 10-year, the subject should be handled again, and maybe at the end of the 10-year, you can reevaluate the situation. I think this is the way that is. For your second question, consumption merging. Yes, and there is also another merge, as you all know, in the scope of free consumption. Demand merging is another thing, but we want to use the consumption merging. Our idea was like this. As EMRA, we did not do this, just sitting in front of the tables or think about this. There were many demands about this. Different consumers want to gather and they want to establish a production facility. Your consumption, let's say your consumption is very low, that's why you don't want to make an investment solely by yourself, and there were certain demands like this. We made this regulation, and after this regulation was done, we said that this investor should give the responsibilities to one person. One person should be delegated, and that person should be responsible for all the consumption facilities. And facilities, or the electricity that they're going to generate should be deemed as the production of that delegated person. So therefore, if it is not hydroelectricity distribution center, because if it's hydroelectricity distribution center, the process will be done by different company. When we talk about energy surplus, the charge of this energy surplus will be made by distribution company or PUMUM. This is the process. The money that you get from the energy surplus will be transferred from PUMUM to distribution company, and distribution company will delegate a person, and that person's bank account will be used for payments or invoices. So what will happen next? The most challenging thing is that what will happen next? The money that you got, how will you transfer this money, or how will you share this money? In which proportion that you will share and transfer your money? According to current regulation, we said that on the basis of good faith or good trust, they can solve this problem and they can share the money within themselves. We thought that they can solve the problems among themselves, but this is an ongoing process. We are still working on this issue. I'm not very sure about the trend of this issue. However, we are still working on this subject. Towards the opening of this system, we do have certain efforts. We will enhance the system. And also, with regards to capacity increase in license production, is subject to license regulations. In the unlicensed, when we talk about capacity increase, we have a new regulation. There is no license, as you all know. There is no application or date limitation. Let's say you have 500 kilowatt facility and you want to increase your capacity up to 1 megawatt or more than 1 megawatt if the law allows. You have to reapply as if it's a new application. All process is going to be done on monthly basis. With other processes, it is going to be evaluated. If different applications are done to the same point, there are certain selection criteria, cogeneration, renewable energy, or other criteria. This criteria can go up to date and application time, and distribution centers should respectively apply all these criteria. If it is 500 kilowatt facility, and if he wants to increase its capacity, he can increase the capacity of its facility.
Imagine a turbine for 500 kilowatts. We have taken that into account as well. And in the legislation, we have written not mechanical, but electric connection. So it's like 500 kilowatts of electricity, because we receive many demands for 500 kilowatts of turbine, and they say that they cannot find it. This is what we tell them. Install a turbine of a higher capacity, like 600 or 700, but make it in such a way that it will give maximum 500 kilowatts, and you have to do it twice. We're not telling you to make 1 megawatt or 5 megawatts, but there's a limit of 500 kilowatts. So make it one notch higher and you can install it. This is what they're saying, and this is how we respond to questions in this regard. Thank you very much for listening to us patiently. It was of great benefit for me, and I hope you enjoyed it also. Bon appétit.